Welcome. Well, hello everybody. I'm absolutely excited, still for the time being, hopefully it will work, and delighted to be here in London and welcome all of you to the world of positive psychology. This talk is going to be a little bit of a broad brush event, so it's a little bit of little different topics within positive psychology. But of course, if you would like to go further, we can explore it further, much more. So a little bit about myself. I am an academic, to begin with. I'm an academic specializing in positive psychology, so PhD, etc. And afterwards, once I specialized in positive psychology, I actually became excited very much about the real applications of positive psychology to real life. And actually, the further I go, the more excited I become about the real applications. So how do we take this thing, which is something scientific, all this research, wonderful papers, and how do we turn it into something workable? And it is easy and not easy, because sometimes it's very easy to come up with great advice, do this, count your blessings, 3 blessings a day, mind apples, etc. Very easy. What is not easy is actually developing a habit. How do you make these things stick? How do you continue doing these good things? How do you actually work in organizations, apart from just telling them that happiness is a wonderful thing? So I'm very much interested in this very practical application. So today we'll be exploring some of these practical applications of positive psychology. By the way, if I do talk too fast, please wave, okay? Okay. And if at some point you stop understanding my accent, please wave. Okay? Because I used to have quite a good British accent, but it kind of got a bit worse, because since a few years ago I share my time between France and Britain and sort of travel all over the world talking to people, so I'm sort of getting confused between languages now. So if I start talking a bit of French or a bit of Japanese, I actually don't talk a lot of Japanese, I can say arigato gozaimasu, thank you in Japanese for anybody who understands. So do wave if I do talk too fast, and do ask questions. If, when I talk, you suddenly have this urgent question, just ask, just wave. Not like this, but like this, and ask, all right? That's the deal. And so one of the applications I will talk about today is applications of positive psychology to parenting and to children. You see, I used to have this sort of quite nice life. I kind of had quite a high-profile position, like a MAP program leader, university, consultancy, a couple of kids, not so bad. And then just overnight, my life has changed. And I suddenly progressed from 2 kids to 5. And so therefore, talking about all the theoretical subjects like resilience became very, very important, because you do face resilience on a daily basis whilst dealing with 4 teenagers, 14, 15, 16, and 17. One of them is sitting there. And a baby of 2.5. So, yes, I'm also very, very passionate about the subject of resilience, both as applied to children and also to parents. So again, any questions, feel free to ask. By the way, monkey is not included. So what is positive psychology? I mean, most of you probably would know the answers to this question, but let me just present it in terms of a very graphical, very visual representation that James Pawelski, one of the leading scholars in positive psychology, has developed. So imagine psychology as usual as this red cape hero. What does it do? It kind of fights the bad things. You know, how many red cape heroes can you name? Spider-Man, Superman, Batman. Excellent. Anybody else?
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman? Okay. I wonder why. So quite a few probably. If you keep thinking about it, you'll come up with more and more. And that's the psychology as usual. You know, there is a monster coming in, some sort of building is about to just collapse, etc. Let's try to save the world. So let's try to stop the bad things from happening once they already started to happen. So you have depression, you have anxiety, how do we treat them? So this is psychology as usual in its representation. And then positive psychology is sort of a green cape hero. So let's try to grow good things before the bad things happened. Let's actually try to develop wisdom, character strengths, positive emotions before all this anxiety and depression actually occur. So this is what positive psychology is about in very visual terms. And instead of more formal definition, positive psychology is a science of optimal human functioning. It's not about fixing what is wrong, it's about building what is strong. The important bit in this definition for me is the science. So it's not just the self-help literature, which can be great, but it is about developing scientific understanding of what works, what doesn't work, what are the factors in play. It is about changing our scientific understanding as well, because the beauty of the science is that sometimes somebody else can actually prove it wrong. So, for example, we used to have the truth about positive emotions. There has to be a 3-to-1 minimum ratio of positive to negative emotions. However, there were wonderful papers questioning this 3-to-1 ratio, and nowadays the actual numerical ratio is questioned, and there are no numbers attached to this particular equation. So the science is something that evolves, that we actually can find out something new, we can challenge what has happened, we can change our opinion on the basis of this understanding. So I will talk today about 3 topics. One, I'll talk a little bit about positive psychology and work, specifically work, organization, leadership, and about certain factors that allow for optimal performance and for optimal functioning, taking into account that our world of work has changed a lot. All the globalization, very strange people coming into workplace that don't want to play in accordance to the previous rules, like young people, for example, people who are actually interested in being really motivated in order to perform a job, outsourcing, all the different interesting issues arising. Then I will talk a little bit about children, applications of positive psychology to education and to child raising, to parenting. And the final part, I will talk a little bit about the future, specifically about the project of the United Nations and Bhutan on the development of sustainable happiness model. Sustainable both in terms of happiness, as lasting happiness, but also sustainable in terms of the world. So it's not only about our own happiness, but about the happiness of all living species. And during the talk, we'll actually have some time for a bit of interaction and a couple of exercises throughout. Is it okay? All right. Are you ready? Are you all very motivated? Okay. What can I do to get you more motivated? Talk slower. Oops. I wasn't looking for that. Never mind. Thank you very much. Okay. So the first topic, let's talk a little bit about positive organizations and leadership. Positive psychology is really making a lot of progress in trying to change the world of organizations and in trying to change the way we approach leadership. I have a slide of pyramids here. And my question is, what is a really good way, the fastest way, to build an Egyptian pyramid? What do you think? The fastest. If you could do anything. Exactly. You get lots and lots of slaves and get them to build it very, very fast, right? Wrong. No slaves. Too expensive, slave-wise, Doesn't work. We no longer live in the old world. Nowadays, to get the optimal productivity, especially in the competing world, in a world where other countries are producing probably faster, much faster than we are, we have to learn something completely different. We really have to know how to motivate people. We really need to create the optimal conditions for people to work in, to enjoy the work they're doing, to be passionate about the work they're doing, to be actually happy at work. Are you happy at work? Please raise your hand if you can truly say you are happy at work. Not bad, okay? I'm not going to ask the other people not to raise their hand, okay? So I'm not going to ask the other 50%. I'm glad you're happy. Me too. But I would love to see that all people in this room would raise their hand. Why not? Why not yet? So what are the factors that are missing from the picture to actually make sure that we are all happy in our workplaces? And so what are the main drivers? What are the main things to focus on in order to improve both our performance and our satisfaction in the workplace? And these are some of the drivers. Raising of the psychological capital, our hope, our optimism, our resilience in order to optimize our performance. Raising of positive emotions, more happiness and positive emotions at work. Making sure that we operate within a growth mindset. Making sure that actually our work makes sense. that you have some sort of meaning in what you are doing, and perhaps not some sort of meaning, but actual meaning, and making sure that we are using our strengths. I will talk about a couple of these factors a little bit further. So let's start with positive emotions and happiness. So, positive emotions. When you look at this picture, obviously they do feel quite nice, right? They not only feel quite nice, they actually produce good results. Because when we experience positive emotions, we are more creative, we are more able to multitask, we are better at problem solving, much better. We think better overall. We think in a way that expands possibilities and opportunities. We function better. I mean, would you prefer to sit at a boring meeting or at a fun meeting? How many fun meetings do you attend? Okay, and yet, where do you think you come up with better decisions? During the fun meeting or during a boring meeting? Fun meeting. Very simple. Why don't we do it? Okay, and looking at these pictures, for example, a very different example, we are not creative. When we are in a suffering mode, when we feel pain, our productivity doesn't improve. I'm going to move on from there because and by the way, very contrary to sort of widespread assumption, the stress does not actually benefit performance. What you have in front of you is an overview of 74 different studies on the relationship between stress and performance. And you know, we always talk about it's good to have some stress to perform better. This hypothesis. But when it's too much stress, it's actually not so good. And what does the research show? Research shows that only 8% of these assumption studies fall into this category. In fact, what the majority, 55% of studies show, that the more stress we have, the worse we perform, not vice versa. And in fact, what the studies do show, that it is when we are happy and engaged at work, we are performing much better. We are more productive, we take less days off sick, so therefore we cost even our employers a lot less. We have much more energy, we are more able to get up in the morning, we are much more engaged than people who are the least happy, we have much more job satisfaction. This goes on and on and on. And this is based on a lot of organizational studies. So, by the way, what is happiness? You're here in the Action for Happiness. You should have an answer to this question, right?
Joy and well-being.
Joy and well-being. Okay, that's a good definition. Any other definitions? Yes, please.
Following your dreams.
Following your dreams. That's nice. Wide-ranging. Excellent. What else? How would you define happiness? Mark? No, okay.
Feeling good about life.
Feeling good about life. Thank you very much. In fact, in psychology, in positive psychology, we operate with two definitions of happiness or well-being. One of them is so-called hedonic well-being, and another one is so-called eudaimonic well-being. So hedonic well-being is indeed about feeling good about life, about having positive emotions, about just feeling happy on a daily basis, about having some good relationships, for example, close people around you. The eudaimonic concept, the second concept, is about doing well. So it's about having meaning in what we are doing. It's about being engaged in different activities in what we are doing. So, to start you thinking a little bit, I'm going to offer you a little warm-up exercise. What you have in front of you is the so-called 5 happiness bubbles. It's actually a model of the founder of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, just operationalized as bubbles. You'll have some instructions in a minute. So this particular model does combine both hedonic and eudaimonic factors of happiness. So pleasure or positive emotions. We have engagement, which is much more eudaimonic. We have relationships, good relationships with people, achievement, feeling that you are moving in the right direction, and we have meaning. What I would like you to do is to take these 5 bubbles as a base and draw your happiness. What is happiness for you? And you can be as creative as you like. So, for example, you can draw one big circle, one big bubble, and a couple of ears on top of it, whatever they are. You can have small circles or large circles. They can be close to each other, can be separated. You can do whatever you want with them. If you want to turn them into triangles, help yourself. So the objective is to actually draw represent your happiness. What is happiness? What is your happiness what is it looking like right now? And then afterwards, please listen, the next step is to talk to the person next to you and try to explain your picture. Why are your bubbles positioned in the way they are? What do you mean by them? What does it mean to you? And would you like to see them changing? How would you like to change them? So you have to kind of adopt a coaching position with respect to each other. And let's try to see how it goes. 5 minutes. I'm ringing this imaginary bell, okay? Can you imagine the bell? Can you see it? It's working? Excellent, great. Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, sorry to bring you back. It's actually a very good coaching exercise. By the way, it was originally developed by Lucy Ryan, who is one of my ex-MAP students and who is a really, really great positive psychology coach. And I do use it a lot in coaching. And there's sometimes very strange discoveries you can come across. Like, for example, one of my clients drew his happiness once in 4 circles. And I asked him, so where is relationship? Where is relationships? He looks at me and says, it's not really important for happiness. Okay? As you wish. If it's not important for you, it's fine. He comes back to the next session, and he says, you know what? I have changed my mind. I think I'll bring relationships here. And he draws this little circle. My wife has disagreed. I've seen him a year later, his relationship circle has sort of grew up a little bit. So I think it's going in the right direction. So it's something, you can actually do a lot of coaching activity around this exercise just by asking questions. What it's like? Why is it like this? How would you like to change it? Can you see it transforming? What would you need to do to start changing this picture from where it is right now to the ideal picture, to where you would like it to be? Questions like this. So feel free to be creative. Well, I'm sorry to stop you on this activity. Let's move on a little bit. Another factor which is very important for performance, for optimal performance for ourselves and also for the organizations we work on, relates to the notion of mindset. I'm sure some of you would have heard it because it's a really, really fundamental notion developed by somebody a researcher called Carol Dweck. So please wave if you do know this, if you have heard about mindsets. Okay, some of you have heard, which is, I'm sure you are all convinced already, but please sit with me to go through it again. So what we do know about the brain in general, and we discover more and more and more, that actually our brains do change. And our brains do change related to the information that we're receiving. So, for example, one study of the London cab drivers has found that their brain structures have changed as a result of passing the knowledge or of learning the knowledge course. You know, it takes years and years and years to pass because you have to memorize and know all the way to navigate around London. Every time I come to London and I just say it place, it works. Every time it works, they know where to go. They don't ask me. Every time I go to Paris, I explain to the taxi driver, then he taps it into the GPS, then half an hour later the GPS wakes up, eventually we get there. I mean, this is when you manage to get a cab at all in Paris. So our brain structures do change on the basis of our learning. In fact, they continue changing. Our brains continue growing up to the day we actually die. So they continue growing and developing, contrary to our assumptions that we just stop growing at a very early age. And what researchers have found out, that our beliefs about whether our capacities are open to growth or not are very, very, very fundamental to both the way we are learning, performing, showing effort or not showing effort, and actually learning from mistakes. So our beliefs about whether our capacities are fixed or developing are very, very important. So we are not here talking about whether we believe we are clever or not clever, whether we believe we are good in maths in the sense whether we are actually good in maths or not good in maths, but whether we believe that we can develop and grow, or whether we believe that we are born like that and we are going to stay like that. So imagine you're thinking quietly, my IQ is about X number, and it's probably going to stay like that. It's actually not true, because even our IQ can change rather dramatically. So this belief as to whether our capacities are growing or not growing is very important. Okay, this is all theoretical. I'm going to make it more practical now. Imagine you are a group of 5-year-old kids. Okay? Imagine, I'm a researcher, asking you to complete a puzzle. This puzzle is quite easy. All of you are going to get it. But then, in fact, you don't know, but I'm going to divide you into 2 groups. So this group, when it completes a puzzle, I'll tell you, well done, you must be really clever. And to this group, when you complete this puzzle, I'll tell you, well done, you must have worked really hard. Okay? Very, very simple, very easy instructions. And then I give you another puzzle. Okay, this time you can't get it. It's beyond your abilities. No 5-year-old, even a genius, is going to get it. It's going to be too hard, impossible. What is going to happen? So all I did, I gave a different stimuli, different response to your activity, to your completion of activity. So here I emphasized your intelligence, fixing it somewhat, and here I just emphasized your effort. So what's going to happen? So you are faced with this really difficult puzzle. This group, I told you are very, very clever. You try a little bit, you can't get it, and you stop, and you don't want to continue. And this group I praised for effort, this group is continuing working on the puzzle, and is enjoying working on the puzzle. This group doesn't like it too much. Afterwards, I give you another puzzle. This time, again, appropriate for a 5-year-old, you can get it. And what happens, something very interesting, this group doesn't want to know anymore. Thank you very much, I have better things to do, I have toys to play with, bye-bye. Okay? And this group is happy to engage again, is happy to continue working, and will solve the puzzle. So what happened here? When I told this group that you must be really clever, when this group has encountered an activity that is too hard for them, the reaction is, I must be not clever enough. So what's the point in trying? Therefore, what we have here, I'm promoting the fixed mindset. Because they're trying to look smart in the face of this task, which is too difficult, if I don't do it, I'm still smart. It's just my choice not to do it. So therefore, they're just protecting their face in a sense, and they're protecting this image of somebody who is trying to continue looking good. And what they're getting is a message that I must be not clever enough, my abilities are low. The meaning of effort is useless, there is nothing I can do, there is no point. Strategy after difficulty, I refuse, there is no point again. So in fact, in the performance after the difficulty, so they're not performing on the task because the performance after difficulty is impaired. So it's really fundamental research, both in relation to children, by the way, and in relation to adults. And what is very often, very important, we keep talking, if you think you are not intelligent, you cannot really achieve a lot, you will be sort of avoiding difficult tasks because you are, again, trying to protect yourself. What is important in this research, it actually applies a lot to high achievers. So we're not only talking about people with low expectations. We're talking also about people with high expectations, people who think they're great, people who keep flying through the school and doing absolutely marvelous job, and then getting to university and at some point hitting a brick wall, and then just somehow stopping and avoiding and actually not continuing anymore. So it's not about whether you are clever or not clever. It is about whether you believe that you can continue developing or not. And if we believe that we continue developing, which is in fact the case, supported by the science, that we do develop. And we do perform much better after any difficulties. Talking about that as well, the meaning of feedback is very important as well. Because, of course, we all moved from sort of very punitive educational systems, not all of us, but some of us in certain generations, to very sort of modern educational systems, when you draw a doodle and the teacher says, great, great job, wonderful. Or your parents tell, oh, that's beautiful, my darling. Not always. If somebody spent 5 seconds on drawing a circle and they're 10, that's not beautiful. So we sometimes keep praising for the achievement rather than for the effort spent on this achievement, rather than for the effort invested. Please raise your hand here, for example, if you kept telling your children, you are really clever, you are really smart. You don't? It's only me? I can't believe it. Yes, exactly, I did it. And then I saw the results. And I stopped doing it as much as I possibly could. Because actually praising for intelligence is fixing the mindset. Clever boy, clever girl. Have you done it? Come on. Please admit. Am I really the only one here? Thank you, Mark. You were really, really supportive. So praising for intelligence, praising for talents rather than for effort can be detrimental because it can actually fix the mindset, therefore prohibiting us from developing. Any questions? I convinced you? Or am I just being boring? Or is it something really, really obvious? Okay, let's move on. So, another very, very fundamental factor in performance, organizational performance and personal performance, is about using your strengths. So what are strengths? Strengths are our capacities, sort of existing, quite natural capacities, applied to different spheres of life. We can be creative, we can be kind, we can be socially intelligent, we can be quite wise. There are many, many strengths. There are different inventories, 3 different inventories at the moment, measuring strengths. What is important in the use of strengths is that when we do use the strengths, we do perform better, but we also feel more energized. And this we can distinguish the strengths from not only weaknesses, but also from our competences or learned behaviors. Do you know, for example, I'm sure many of you can do certain things very well. Like somebody can really pay attention to detail. Somebody can do family accountancy really, really well. But they get up afterwards and they just hate it. They hate the whole evening, the whole day spent on that. They hate it. They feel drained. So this is not a strength. A strength is if when you just spend 3 hours, for example, looking at tiny errors of somebody and saying, wow, I had a great time. It's possible, by the way. There are people who are really, really good in details. I have a husband like that. So it can be difficult for others sometimes. Never mind. So these are the strengths. And developing the strengths, what does it mean for you? For example, when we praise people in organizations for their strengths, when we focus on their strengths, our employees end up being much more engaged. So, for example, when we ignore the strengths, somehow engagement is very, very minimal. When we focus on the weaknesses, engagement does go up somewhat, but not completely. Saying that when we focus on the strengths, when we focus on what people are really good at, and making sure that people use what they're good at in their everyday tasks at work and at home, somehow, surprise, surprise, they become much more engaged. Because they're working in their best capacity, so they're being the best they can possibly be, and at the same time, of course, they're producing better. So, how do we discover our strengths? How do we work with our strengths? And there are different inventories, as I mentioned. We have 3 different inventories: VIA, Values in Action; Realize 2, which is an inventory of strengths developed by a British company called CAP; and also the Gallup Strengths Finder, which is another approach to strengths definition. They have slightly different definitions. But again, I'm not going to bore you with all these definitions and different inventories and how to measure. What I would like to do, I would like to do a little exercise, another one. So, do pick up this paper in front of you. It's actually an exercise paper. As you have the paper in front of you, please listen to me a little bit. What I would like you to do is in pairs, straight away in pairs, look at this list of strengths. It's not a comprehensive list. There are about 20 strengths on this page. We can talk, we can identify between 24 and 64 different strengths. So this is not a comprehensive list, it's just a sample of different strengths. But looking at this list, try to identify about 2 different strengths, 2-3 strengths that describe you best. Next, introduce yourself to the person next to you, giving concrete examples of when you are using the strengths. Next, challenge each other a little bit to uncover some additional strengths not on this page, using questions like what brings out your best? What is your most significant achievement? What makes you feel you are being who you really are? Next, if you know each other well, okay, that's for people who are friends sitting next to each other, nominate at least one other strength for this person. Tell them, I actually think you are pretty courageous. And this is why, for example. And if you don't know each other well, try to discuss a little bit how much you are able to exercise your top strengths in your job right now. And how can you exercise them more? So the 4 and 5 are different depending on whether you are friends already or you don't know each other. Okay, let's go. We have 7 minutes. Okay. Yes, please. Randomly. Because basically I'm working with different classifications of strengths, so I'm working with 50 major strengths. And when developing this particular slide, I just looked at the pictures that fitted well next to each other with regard to color. So this one is completely random. And if you're interested in learning more about strengths, there are about 50 of them out there when you come out. But the answer is random. So random on the basis of the 50 strengths classification that I'm working with. I see. So. Okay, I hope you had some fun and a bit of experience. Again, working with strengths. It's quite tricky, actually, because strengths sound great. And people get really quite excited when they start working with strengths. But then one was, as with many habits, sort of, they get excited, they think it's a great idea, and then they just go ahead with their lives doing nothing. So there is a sort of danger with strengths work that you just identify it, think it's great, and move on, and do nothing about it. So if you really want to integrate strengths fully in your life, I mean, the first step for me is to really identify them, using different inventories, props like cards, interviews, discussion with your friends, asking your other friends what do you think your strengths are, for example. Identifying a sort of set of strengths, first of all, and owning them. So thinking, okay, I think this is really me. How do you know it's really you? I mean, the gut test. And also if you do feel this energy when you're using the strengths. So if you feel good when you're doing this, there is a good chance it is your strength. But that doesn't end here, because once you are clear and have identified the strengths, afterwards the next point is, what do you do about them? How can you really make sure you are going to perhaps reshape your work, change your work, reshape your family life on the basis of the strengths? And like with all the good intentions, there is a good danger that they sort of fly out of the window the next day. So one way for me is to try to work with somebody else, like a buddy, somebody, like a coach, anybody almost, to try to really make sure that your life, the way you are living it, is reflective of what you are really are, where you feel really at your best. So if you really want to make this use of strengths, try to take them to the next step. Don't just drop it, because it is very, very, very easy to drop it and move on. So I'm going to move on another topic now, positive education, a little bit of positive parenting. Now I'm going to start this section with a question of Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology. In 2 words or less, what do you want most for your children? Happiness. By the way, do you have children? Okay? Or do you have some other children of somebody else who you think are quite nice? Okay? By the way, do you know that that children are not a guarantee of happiness for yourself, right? You know that. Do you know that all the research shows that unfortunately under fives and teenagers are going to bring your happiness down, right? I only have 5 of them at the moment. And it's between 5 and 12 where your happiness is going to improve. And after they leave home. So, okay. I have some sympathetic nods here, yes. Yes. Nevertheless, they do bring meaning. And I have this very happy child sitting here, I can see. Okay. Don't tell your brothers and sisters, please. So, they do bring meaning, and they do bring engagement, and they do bring basically sense to our life, of course, of course. But of course we do want happiness for them. But the second question here is, what do the schools teach? Okay. Unless you're in a very lucky school, like the Wellington, but then you do have to come up with about 25 or 30K per year. Most of them don't teach happiness. And they do teach something else, like achievement thinking skills, math skills, etc., and lots of different skills, which are quite useful, but are they useful enough? And what do they not teach? And what they don't teach for me is sort of something else that is actually very useful when it comes to life. Some other skills, some skills of dealing with the daily challenges, with changes in our lives, with being stuck in traffic late to the interview, or with, for example, moving to other countries. Have you ever moved countries? Huh? Yes, okay, a few of them. I have, once I moved to England, and afterwards I promised myself, after about 14 years or so, that I will never, ever, ever, ever move again. And what did I do next? I moved to France, of course, as you do. And I think, okay, now I'm grown up enough to know what to do about it, to know how to deal with it. And just every day you wake up and you do something, and somehow things change. I moved to France when I was a few months pregnant. And I remember going to a lab because suddenly my doctor decided that I have to be examined for diabetes. So I just go to this lab. I'm about 7 months pregnant. I'm about here. I can hardly walk. I go like this, kind of, okay, all the mother category. I have to be examined for diabetes. Great. I turn up to this lab. I sit in a huge queue. Eventually they get round to me. She looks at me and says something in French, okay? I don't get her. Eventually we find some sort of common language. And I get the point. She asks me, where is your glucose? I look at her and I think, okay, you are in the lab and I'm here as a patient, right? It is your glucose, not mine. And she looks at me and says, where is your glucose? Okay, try to explain something. Okay, only about 5 minutes later, I get the point that as a patient, it is my responsibility to make sure that I buy glucose before turning up to the lab to get this diabetes test. Okay, I don't know why it's my responsibility, but it is my responsibility because I'm in France. So I get out, and she tells me, go to the pharmacy and buy glucose. Okay, fine, I'll go to the pharmacy. I get out. Okay, I get to the pharmacy. Locked. Why is it locked? Because it's Monday. Of course, all the pharmacies are closed on Monday. Don't you know? No. Because I'm in France, they're closed on Monday. Okay, and so the whole thing continues, and this is just one of the stories. I get my kids from the English school to the French school. If you want any questions, ask them later. They just turn up there. First of all, everybody speaks French for some reason. That's fine. But eventually they keep looking at the numbers. I mean, numbers have to be quite universal, right? So the 5 is there in both languages. I mean, obviously, once you get to 80 in France, it starts being very strange because you have to multiply 4 by 20 to even say 80, never mind. You just have to change the mindset, that's fine. But for some reason, the numbers don't work like in Britain. They kind of jump a year or 2. So they end up being sort of feeling a little bit stupid and kind of out of place here, etc. So where do we teach these skills? Where do we teach these skills? Where do we teach how to adapt to difficult situations, to different, I mean, not so difficult, I guess, okay, you didn't get the glucose, but different situations when you somehow are puzzled and you don't know how to react and you don't know how to function, and somehow, with all your life experience, you don't fit in. So where do we teach these skills? So for me, there are several arguments why we need to teach the skills, because, I mean, there are a couple of big arguments, the so-called prevention and promotion arguments. I mean, one of the big arguments is that if we don't teach the skills, there are some bad things that are going to happen. For example, depression is going to rise, because depression and anxiety are, in fact, rising in most of our countries. So they're rising in UK, in US and Australia, for example, in the whole Anglo-Saxon world. They are rising, in fact, in France quite as well, probably even better, because I found out that France, despite all the wine and cheeses and all the wonderful things, ignoring the oysters, which I do actually like very much, the French are sort of the winners in Europe with regard to the use of antidepressants. This I didn't know. Don't ask me why. So they are rising up depression and anxiety. And of course, with rising depression and anxiety, we do have continuous problems in terms of onset is earlier. Children are suffering from alcohol and drug addictions, interpersonal difficulties, etc. So if we don't teach the skills, these things, these negative things, are going to rise. And there is another argument, of course. It is not just about the prevention. It is also about the promotion. So teaching happiness skills is going to promote creativity, health, in fact, our capacity to interact with each other, trust in the society. Happy people are living longer. I'm sure many of you would have heard about the happy nun studies, in which the nuns that actually scored high on happiness when they were only about 18 or 20 years old turned out living 9 years longer. So if you do want to sort of live longer, do make sure you are happy. So, and again, of course, putting them together, there are longitudinal British studies that showing very, very clearly that emotional health, and we're talking both here about emotional health in terms of the lack of depression, anxiety, in terms of the presence of well-being, is predicting emotional health later on in life, surprise, surprise, and is predicting adult life satisfaction. So when we're talking about positive education from a positive psychology perspective, we're talking about two main factors, resilience and well-being, and how to develop them both. So the first question is, can resilience be taught? Can we bounce back better from different stresses in our life? Can we, when we are facing this difficulty, can we sort of come back and function well again? Well, it's a big question. And it usually starts with big sort of theoretical ideas of resilience. It starts afterwards, progresses to operationalizing resilience, obviously from a very theoretical and scientific perspective. Of course, we can talk about how to measure resilience, etc. But one question is very simple. If resilience can be taught, or if we are assuming that resilience can be taught, how do we actually teach it to the kids? And here I have this real passion, which I talked a little bit about developing practical applications of positive psychology to, for example, kids. So what do you do? I mean, very simple. You take a concept, an abstract concept, sort of theoretical concept, such as resilience. You try to examine it a little bit. You try to make sure you do know, as an adult, how it functions scientifically. What are the factors predicting resilience? What are the important points that we can, what are the important levers that we can press upon to make sure we develop the resilience? Then, we actually turn it into something a bit more tangible, something really concrete. Because when we are talking to a 10-year-old, we are not going to give a scientific definition of resilience or the factors that are predicting it, okay? We need something more concrete and more tangible, something really, really tangible. And then it has to be another factor in place. I think it has to be funky. So if you want to teach this very abstract, fantastic concepts to children, you have to make sure they're tangible and funky. So here we go. When we teach resilience to kids, we, for example, introduce a notion of parrot. There we go. I have a prop. Imagine a little parrot sitting on your shoulder, telling you what to think. And this parrot, or little thoughts inside of your head, are actually affecting the way you feel. And we have quite a few of these different parrots. So I'm sure you will all recognize a parrot in yourself, even if you are an adult, and most of you are. So we have a guilty parrot, you know? And when it's all my fault. It's all my fault. Why did I do it? Why did I not get the ticket in advance, for example? Why did I have to make sure that I have to turn up an hour before because I didn't get the ticket in advance, etc.? It's all my fault. You can have a judge parrot. They shouldn't be doing that. That's not right. I mean, this is not the way things are done, okay? How do you feel, by the way, if you have this parrot? You feel very upset with a lot of people because they really don't do things right, don't you think so? Okay? Or we can have an angry parrot, a blamer parrot. I mean, it's all your fault. I mean, it is absolutely all your fault, all the time. I mean, I turn up from work, I've been working really, really hard, the dishes are not done again. Can't you just do the dishes? I mean, is it so difficult to do the dishes? I mean, why don't you just go shopping, make sure you buy all the food, etc.? Okay, you get the point? You get the warrior parrot. It's all going to go wrong. I must make sure I leave this talk on time, because if underground doesn't work, I will be late home, then I'll not sleep enough, then I'll be very tired tomorrow morning, okay? You get the point. Or you get this very classic parrot, it's a teenager parrot. Whatever. Does it look like I care? Okay. And what is interesting is these parrots, or in fact, attributional styles, the way we think and process events sitting on our shoulder, actually predict the way we experience events, the way we feel, and the way we behave. And by just challenging this interpretation of events, this perception of events, we can become much more resilient, just by letting the parrot fly away sometimes, you know. Here we go. Gone. By letting the parrot fly away sometimes, if it's telling us something a bit rubbishy, we can become much more resilient when faced with daily stress situations. So, for example, we'll talk about my parrots and glucose later on. Well, there are some other concepts very appropriate for resilience. For example, resilience muscles. We know from the literature there are certain levers that we can press to make sure resilience develops. For example, the lever or a muscle of I have. People who have good friends and good relationships and a supportive network and enough people around them to rely on do survive difficult situations much better. People who have some confidence in their abilities, the I can sort of muscle, again, cope with difficult situations much better. People who like a lot of things or experience a lot of positive emotions in difficult situations sometimes, again, are much more resilient. So, for example, one study of Barbara Fredrickson, one of the positive psychology researchers, has shown that people who had more positive emotions before the September 11th attacks in the United States were actually much more resilient in the longer terms when dealing with the impact of these attacks. And of course, knowing your strengths, knowing that you are somebody, I am a strong person, I'm a person with some good characteristics, again, is another factor predicting resilience. Just tell you a story, a little story. All this very nice. Parrots work quite well with children. We did a lot of resilience training in East London, many different schools in East London, teaching teachers and children afterwards how to become more resilient. They also do work with adults, kind of adults get them. You get the parrot. Do you have the blamer parrot or not? Somehow everybody gets them. Nevertheless, once we've been faced with this very strange challenge, we were approached by the Young Foundation and by the police in Harrow to try to develop resilience of gang members. I think it's a very good concept. I mean, people or young people who are gang members, they are there for a reason. And very often, they don't really have the emotional resilience skills enabling them to deal with their sometimes very difficult situations outside of the street setting. So in some ways they are resilient, in some ways they are very much not resilient at all. So how do you take sort of couple of, not couple, 20, 30, 40, sort of those big hoodie type teenagers and try to teach them resilience skills? I mean, they're not that well sort of educated qualifications-wise, they're a bit disillusioned with the whole society. Obviously the gun culture does play a role. So how do you teach this, kids, young people, resilience skills? So we had a lot of brainstorming, a bit of thinking. What do we do about it? And of course, for example, we do know, and we try to teach kids, for example, that our thoughts, our perceptions, the parrots, do affect the way we feel. But we thought parrots really are not going to do the trick. You know, you must have heard about the ABC acronym. So adversity, beliefs, consequences. So adversity is actually sort of influencing the way you perceive the situation, and afterward this belief that you have is influencing your feelings and behavior. But we thought, okay, let's make it a bit easier. And we, I think, got the point across. We tried to explain to them that brain does influence feelings, and afterwards the way you act. And we made it a bit sort of tangible. Instead of brain, feelings, you act, and we combined it into this very nice spiral called BFU. So brain, feelings, you act. Brain, F, you. You get it? They got it too. Somehow they really got it. That sometimes our brain can really F us without much other explanation. And somehow this sort of thinking, perceptions inside of the head became a bit more tangible. And we also changed the parrots, you know, little parrots, they flew away, and we changed them into hoods. So the brain puts the hood on you, preventing you from seeing the situation the way it really is. And again, somehow they got it. If you want to know a little bit more, I wanted to play a video, but I think we're not going to have some more time. Emotional resilience for gangs. If you just type that on the internet, you'll have the video showing the program and the way it was working. So, and what about happiness? How do we teach happiness? What do we teach? What are the happiness skills that we need to teach children? I mean, some of the things to teach is that money doesn't really make us happy, or power doesn't really make us happy. And even all the beauty products that we all want to buy don't make us happy either. Surprise, surprise. Okay, some of the fundamentals, we all know it. But why do we keep buying them? Okay? Why do you have makeup on? Okay, never mind. So, okay, what we do teach instead are the happiness skills. Skills such as meditation, mindfulness, being able to focus yourself, to calm yourself sometimes. Skills like understanding that choice can be very, very difficult to cope with, and too much choice doesn't actually help us. Too many mobile phones don't make us happy. It is actually choosing between them that makes us unhappy. That exercise is not only good for the way you look, but also for the way you feel, etc. So this is the type of lessons, happiness lessons, that we do teach in different programs in school that actually do make a difference. Again, any questions later? So hopefully, one day, we'll all turn up with a nation of really much happier kids. And finally, I would like to talk a little bit about sort of more sustainable happiness, happiness from a bigger perspective, from a bigger picture. For this last year, during the last year, I was very, very, very fortunate to be involved in working with the government of Bhutan on the development of happiness-based public policy recommendations with a group of amazing scholars, including Martin Seligman, Ed Diener, and really very interesting personalities and scholars from the field of positive psychology and beyond. Have you ever heard about Bhutan, by the way? Bhutan, this little country in Himalaya. Why is it famous? They measure gross national happiness. By the way, there is a change of government, but I don't know exactly what's going on now. So there are some changes in political perspective. Yes, it is a beautiful, beautiful country, really surrounded by beautiful, beautiful mountains, with really, really beautiful bases as well, sort of sometimes with ice. And the capital is full of wonderful creatures called dogs in masses, which don't bark and don't bite. They just wander around. They're great. So anyway, and this little country has volunteered to change the world by organizing, by initiating a huge UN conference on sustainable happiness, on the new economic paradigm, on challenging the way we are consuming resources of the planet, and basically saying that the happiness should be the fundamental notion for changing the world. So for them, happiness, they measure it in 9 different domains, including education, health, community vitality, living standards, good governance, they have devised very solid instruments to measure happiness in different domains. And the conclusion of this absolutely marvelous work was a report to the United Nations on what to do. And this is one of the models from this report, basically saying and showing how and what happiness skills need to be taught, both in schools and to the society, to make sure that fundamental human needs are satisfied and to make sure that we are going towards a holistic developmental agenda in which our happiness also matters as much as the happiness of trees, for example, and anything that grows and anything that lives, to make sure that not only us that are going to survive, but also them as well, which are, as you know, somewhat related, and probably not even somewhat. So this is a really marvelous piece of work, and work that has been going on and is continuing to be going on. And at this point, I'm going to challenge you. Imagine that you are in this position to really influence our government, your government, different governments around the world, and to think about what can we really do very practically to make sure that we can change some sort of the public policy to make sure that happiness does become the priority. So what would you do, very practically? What would you do? What would your recommendations be? So let's, for example, taking work. This can be the possible recommendations, putting caps on overtime hours, for example, incentives to reduce overwork, promotion of physical activity at work, etc. So taking one of these domains as a basis, what would you do? I wanted to develop the whole happiness manifesto, but I think we'll have to do it at home. So can you just, for a couple of minutes, turn next to the person you are and just tell them what one action, very concrete action, would you recommend as something tangible to really make sure that happiness is in the heart of our society? 1 minute? 2? Yes, please. Okay, I have to bring you back. Hello? So your homework exercise is to develop the happiness manifest and send them to Mark, right? Okay, let's just start thinking. What are these actions at the very large scale, personal actions, but also the large societal scale, we can take, we can recommend, and we can put in place to change something, to ensure that sustainable happiness is there for us and for the planet as well. So at this point, I'm going to say thank you to you and open the floor for questions. Any questions that you like. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, please. Okay.
It says approximately 50% of managers in their jobs feel as though they're totally unfulfilled in their job because their jobs are not allowing them to use their strengths, which in turn is inhibiting their development, which in turn is inhibiting opportunity and making them feel unfit.
Absolutely disillusioned.
Economic necessity means they have to stay in their job.
Absolutely.
So I mean, what you're saying is very altruistic, but the reality of the situation is very dire.
I agree. I actually, trying to fit into the slides, I deleted one of the slides showing that the reality is very dire, in fact. And many of the reports are showing that less than 50% of people are using strengths in their work. Sometimes we are talking about 25% of people only using strengths in their work. So I completely agree with you. And the reality of business is exactly that. And when I go and work with businesses, it's exactly what I'm facing. So of course the answer is, it is top-down and bottom-up in terms of the answer. So yes, we can change something from a personal perspective in terms of there is usually, once we accept responsibility for our own being, in a sense, we can change usually and shift the job somewhat to make sure that we are using our strengths more, for example, as one of the drivers. But at the same time, of course, the actual organizational changes are also necessary, absolutely, which is why I'm talking about the overall agenda. And so, yes, there is an individual responsibility, but there is also collective responsibility. There is organizational responsibility at the same time. What is important, however, is that even for the economic necessity, it's actually promoting this argument. We know that when people are engaged and using their strengths more, they are performing better. Therefore, there is an outcome on the economic outcomes as well. So the organizations will and do function better when they have happier, more motivated, more engaged employees. So, and this is the argument for the changing of the organizations as well, not only the changing of the individual. So for me, I think it's a huge work. I'm not too optimistic, in fact. I think it's very important because I do try to live the philosophy I'm preaching, sometimes worse, sometimes better, sometimes I'm not successful. So I know these type of changes are not very easy fixes, not very easy changes. A workshop for 2 days for senior management is not going to solve it. And there are many of us who are organizational consultants here who sit there and sort of nod somehow. So it is not about the very little changes about let's just go and teach some happiness for 2 days and everybody's somehow going to get happy. No, they're not. It is a fundamental change process coming from this, first of all, shifting of the perspective, knowing that actually happier people do perform better, so there is also the benefit for the business as well, and that's the way for me to go in and for how I believe it's possible to go in and also change the organization. Hope it, yeah. Absolutely, no, thank you. Not only for me, I'm sorry. I hopefully for everybody sitting in this room. I think if you are sitting in this room, there must be a reason for it. So it is an ongoing work, it's hard work, it is not easy, and it is not a quick fix. Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you.
I can shout.
It's okay. Or you can shout with the mic.
Okay, thank you. Clearly there's research about happiness and employees. Is there research about if happier children perform better at school?
Yes.
If so, could you let me know?
Yes. Actually, in terms of the performance, there are studies. I would say the field of work on the performance is and well-being for children is relatively limited. And about 5 years ago, we didn't really have many strong papers. However, there are some papers now coming in showing that performance of children is indeed enhanced by well-being, usually via, for example, the enhancement of creativity, for example, the enhancement of problem solving, etc. So there is some evidence, but it is relatively limited. If you are interested in specific papers, because I'm collecting them, that's one of my hobbies to collect some of the papers, you can actually feel free to send me an email and I can send some of the papers to you. Yes, please.
Based on your earlier question, how
Sorry, yes, how in control do I feel people are of their happiness? There is a standard answer to that in terms of research, for example, of Sonia Lyubomirsky, who is a very famous happiness researcher, does show that we can affect approximately 40% of our happiness, so it's about 40% under our control. Saying that, there were also some papers and some arguments challenging this position, showing the percentage is probably a bit smaller, talking perhaps more about 25-30%. So if we had to give the numerical value, I would probably stay prudent here and probably would go with about 25-30% response. So yes, we can change things. We can't change everything. We can't just wake up tomorrow morning and be a completely different person, because all our habits are extremely difficult to change, including the habits of thinking. Nevertheless, some changes are possible. Yes, please.
Thank you. What should be our attitude towards death? And if we had a different attitude towards death, would it mean that we could spend more of the health budget in preventing people getting ill, rather than at the moment we spend a huge proportion of the health budget on people in the last days and weeks and months of their life?
Absolutely. Actually, there is some work on a lot of work on positive aging, and there is also some work, more philosophical, I would say, because such a scary subject, on positive death, in fact, and sort of existential work, bringing philosophy together with positive psychology. So that's quite interesting. So obviously, it's quite difficult to give an answer to this question because it very much depends where people are in terms of their age, in terms of their health, etc., etc., etc. So it's a very difficult moral question to answer just like this on the stage. But overall, most of positive psychology research does show that in general, promoting health, including psychological health, all different aspects of psychological health, for the healthy population, the kind of the healthy mean, can really shift both the health years of living and can shift both the much more healthy attitude as well towards aging. We also do know, for example, our perception of the aging process, our perception of the death process do influence as well our actual perception, if it's a positive process or negative process, do influence even the number of years we live and the number of years we live in a healthy shape or not healthy shape as well. So it's quite a complex argument, but in general, of course, as a positive psychologist, I cannot say, let's just focus on the ill state rather than the health state. I think the health state has a huge argument for focusing upon. So, thank you. Interesting question. Interesting question. Very interesting. Yes, please. Yes, yes, please. Okay, sorry, I'm ignoring you. I'm sorry. Okay, yes, please. Shout.
Thank you very much. My question is also about young people and children, and I'm hello.
Shouting, yeah.
So my question is about young people. I made to think of a UN Commission study that I think in Italy spoke of British children faring worse on many measures of well-being, educational outcomes, and particularly the most damaging perhaps happiness.
Yes.
This was, I think, 2 years ago, and again repeated.
Yes.
Similar results found in 2012.
Yes, I know. And also in Japan and Russia. And Singapore, okay. Yes. I know and I'm aware it's not only the UN studies, also the PISA studies, European studies, WHO studies. There are many studies using slightly different measures, slightly different outcome variables, etc. But all coming up with not a very happy picture with regard to well-being of our children. And I do think there is a lot of work to be done. What I'm finding kind of more from a very sort of hands-on perspective and sort of experiencing different cultures and different educational systems, that different cultures have different strengths in different dimensions. So there are certain aspects of the British educational system that I think are pretty good in terms of the promotion of sort of engaged learning, interaction in a classroom, for example, which can contribute to well-being, to autonomy, giving the students sort of the capacity for autonomy, autonomous decision-making, etc., etc. So there are certain very good aspects, but there are certain very damaging aspects. And some of the damaging aspects, I think, include not enough work being done with parents. And, I mean, we don't have the driving license to be parents. And we sort of bump into lots and lots of cars on the way as we start the process, for example. And we are not very prepared, even as parents, for all the changes we are facing. At what age do you buy a mobile phone? What is going to be the consequence? How are you going to get your kids off the screens in whatever shape and size they come, etc. All of these changes are very, very recent, so we as parents are not prepared. And in fact, these changes, including the modern technology, and by the way, I'm not against modern technology, absolutely not, because there are good users of modern technology and there are not good users of modern technology, but we are not equipped as parents and even as schools to deal with these difficult and new challenges, with the challenge of who has got a better PlayStation, with the challenge of whose parents pay more for this X piece of clothing, etc. We're not equipped yet. And there are negative outcomes of consumerism, negative outcomes of the lack of time of parents, of teachers for the kids, for example, negative outcomes of certain comparison processes in terms of we are comparing with the rich and famous, etc. There are many, many negative outcomes of many processes. So yes, there is a lot of work to be done, and different work, I think, in different cultures. So for example, in France, the discipline issue is much better in the classroom. And discipline, by the way, is not only important for teachers to teach, but it's also some self-discipline of children, which sometimes is not quite there. I have observed so many lessons that sometimes you're a bit scared. This self-discipline of children is also very important for them to be happier in the long term, contributing to the long-term happiness solutions, because sometimes it is not getting and not eating the sweet today that is going to predict your happiness tomorrow, in very simple terms. So, for example, France, I would say, is doing much better on certain discipline issues, on certain academic stimulation issues, but it's doing much worse on the so academic standards are higher, but the classroom interaction is much lower. I've seen children, the well-being and interest graphs in France, they go as children enter secondary school at 11, or in fact a little bit later, it goes like this, like this, like this. So well-being falls every year after year. Interest falls year after year after year, ending up somewhere there. So kids are completely bored in school. How do you want them to be happy if they're bored to death, etc.? So I would say, again, the complex solution, different educational, cultural systems require different solutions, sensitive solutions, contextual solutions, because, again, different schools, different economic, demographic combinations of backgrounds, again, require different solutions. So it's not one size fits all, definitely not, but there are lots and lots of problems and questions and lots of work to be done as well. So sorry for this very long answer. One more question, two more questions, one here and one here afterwards, okay? No? Okay? Okay, one more question.
You talked about the happiness of children in different... You talked about the happiness of children in different countries. Does that match the happiness of the adults in the same countries?
Yes and no, because obviously the children experience is not exactly the same as adult experience. I mean, again, there are interactions between the time, the period of life, the different contextual influences on us, etc., etc. But of course, yes, overall, what we are experiencing is, in terms of, for example, adults, not so much a huge drop perhaps in happiness levels, but what we experience in most of the Western societies is the lack of growth in happiness levels with regard to the overall growth in economic activity and GDP growth. So the GDP growth is there, the happiness growth is not, the depression growth in certain cultures is higher than in other cultures. So it's again, depending on the culture, depending on the context, etc. So, as people are starting to probably run home and cook dinner, and not only that, let's finish the question time, and I'm just going to ask Mark to say a couple of words. Thank you very much.
Ilona, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I was struck by a reminder this evening of what positive psychology isn't. And I think often when you hear about positive psychology, sort of a skeptical mindset will be thinking that this is about positive thinking only. And I think there's two really important things that Eleanor's shown for us this evening, that A, this is a field of science that has evidence and empirical data behind it. This is not sort of grasping for ideas and reliance on sort of self-proclaimed gurus. This is God's substance. But the other thing is, this isn't about taking some kind of glib, frivolous, let's pretend everything's positive if it isn't approach to life. This is about the real gritty essence of what it is to be alive, to cope with adversity, to struggle through the challenges we face. So positive psychology isn't about ignoring the negative. It's about saying, let's also focus on how we can be at our best and spend more effort on that. And I think that's come out really strongly for me tonight in this fantastic talk. So thank you, Ilona, for being here. I just wanted to add one tiny point to that really fascinating question about why the UK does so badly in child well-being. It was UNICEF that did the work, and there was one study done and a finding as to why the UK had this discrepancy with, for example, Spain and other countries in terms of lower child well-being. And I think the finding is so important for all of us as a priority shift for our society. And the finding was this: it was that in general, UK adults and education systems and parents in particular were putting more emphasis on material accumulation and less emphasis on time and connection. And what you often found was, instead of spending time with children and giving them love and attention, we were substituting buying things for them. It was that materialism instead of connection. And I think that, to me, is a sort of metaphor, a sort of symbol of the problem we face in many ways, that we're too often putting things before people. And actually, I think, again, at the heart of Ilona's talk is that we are a connected species, and it's our relationships and our attitudes that matter as much, or in fact much more, than the things in our lives. So on that note, please join me again in thanking Ilona, and thank you for being here as well. Now, Just for one final note, you may have seen on your way in, there's a whole array of wonderful books related to this topic that Ilona's publishers have brought along. They're outside in the foyer. Please do check them out. Lots of wisdom in there. There's also, if you're interested in the strengths exercise we did, there's some strengths cards that allow you to look in more detail at the full range of strengths. So please do take a moment just to look at some of the really good resources on the way out. Thank you for being here.